is my favourite one.
Anyone using sort of formal project management tools at all? No? Anyone recognise this diagram, sort of work breakdown structure? So again, a little bit similar to the first diagram, but this is much more at task level. And I would again use this when I'm reading through a tender document, and I do it handwritten, don't use any fancy tools, and as I'm going through the requirement, I start packaging the work up into different areas. And presenting it this way is, it's not just about, you know, saving space or whatever. It's demonstrating to the client that you have got a full understanding of all the activities required in the job. So this is one that we've done for a client who go in and install the big fancy glass panels, interior glass panels. And I said, well, do you have a methodology? Well, you know, we just go in. I said, well, if you just wait there, we'll stop there. Talk me through the process of what you do. And this is what we came up with. So apologies for the top line is the work package descriptions. So the first one is mobilisation stage. The second one is when they go and do all the design work, liaise with the architects. The third one is actually going in and installing it. This fourth one here, for some of you might all have this, is the health and safety work package, so all the things you have to do there. And then conventionally, in a work breakdown structure, this fourth one is always your project quality management, maybe communications and all that. So again, in about a third of a page, there's a full explanation to show understanding of how the work's going to be organised. If you've got subcontractors or partners, maybe they've got a different colour of box to show where they come in. And then below that, you have quite simple tables just to say work package 1, here's some bullet points to describe the tasks. If you're tendering to design a nuclear submarine, you'll start with something that looks like that, and then you'll obviously have a very complex technical task description, subtasks and so on. But for most of us, in a tender, a really, really nice way to present your understanding, and that is when they say, what's your methodology, what's your implementation plan, this is it here. And then you describe who, when, what the dependencies and all these sort of things. You link that to a project schedule. Some people will use very fancy Gantt charts, but again, work package 1, 2, 3, show how it works. Put in your meetings maybe at the bottom. And then you put in some sort of risk assessment. So this is not tripping over the cables risk assessment. This is, what is it that can stop the project in its tracks? What's the consequence of the risk? And what's our plan B? And again, it's quite a typical criticism. We're quite good maybe at saying what we're going to do, but you need to be able to show the client you've thought through the what-ifs as well. Sorry, I'm scooting through this very quickly. So quality performance, again, you'll see in tenders, you know, do you have ISO certified systems? If you're lucky and you do, you can tick the box and you might get your full 30 marks or 20 marks. For a lot of us, we don't. So you're on to the next question and say, well, please describe your quality assurance system, quality management system. Again, that could be a very long, rambling description, so it needs to be organised. I would generally go back to that work breakdown structure and say, so here's work package 1. For each of these tasks, here are the quality checks that are going to come in, who's going to do them at each of that stage. So that's one way to organise it. What are the key performance indicators? KPIs you'll be asked for increasingly. So work package 1, mobilisation, our KPI is to have the project up and running in 2 weeks. Installation, it might be something to do with delivery times, on time and full deliveries, X%. So you can start to allocate across that work plan the different points where quality checks come in. And then, very important, every tender and PPQ now you'll be asked about what your process is for continuous improvement. So you need to show that you've got loops back. So here's the check, here's who's going to do it, against what standard, when they're going to do it, and what happens next if whatever the standard isn't met. And that, again, logically can be quite a nice table. Again, I apologise, we'll have these slides will all be available, but this is, again, something we've put in for prize for tenders. So here's the process on the left. We're going to source materials, source subcontractors, we're going to create a design. So it kind of links back to this maybe installation type project. Here's our quality assurance. We've got a supplier approval questionnaire, for example. They've got to meet X% criteria, and here's who's responsible. So you've got a really nice summary then of what the quality indicators are for your project. Continuous improvement, I would be looking for evidence of customer feedback forms. You might include some of those in your appendices. Focus groups, depending on the type of work that you do. Staff appraisals, that's a perfect route for feeding through new ideas, but also in terms of embedding improvement. Say, well, here's what we've agreed. Through the appraisals process, we make sure everyone understands that and they get the training to deliver it. Other standards, maybe trade associations, that's quite a nice way to say that you keep up to date with best practice, which is another aspect of quality and performance. Maybe investors and people, any other standards. So anything that avoids you saying, yes, yes, you know, we keep up to date with best practice in the industry. You think, yes, but how? You know, what are the tools, what are the links, provide some evidence of how you actually do that. And then client sort of relationship, that's another important part of quality. So what evidence do you have of working in partnership? Partnership generally means a sort of sharing of risk, or some would say it's where the contractor takes on a lot more risk. But you get some nice examples, again, construction, where they go in and start a job, they do a sort of value engineering process halfway through, they come up with a solution and say, right, we're going to stop the work and do it differently, and maybe we as contractors actually might get less money out of it, but the project overall is a more sustainable solution. So a partnership approach, not us sitting with our contract saying, you know, contract change notice if you want to change anything at all. And finally, company capability. This probably is the area more than anything else, I would say, where people undersell themselves. We don't tend to undersell ourselves on our websites, we don't do it in our brochures, but there's something about the tender form that kind of beats us into submission, and we get into a mode where we're sort of filling in the boxes, and we don't really read it through and think, well, actually it's a competition. There's going to be 30, 40 of us maybe at PQQ stage, so we're going to have to write something down that makes us stand out somehow in terms of the people that are all bidding. We've met quite a few people, not so many recently, that were scored down and said, well, we didn't put it in because they know us very well. They know we can do the work. We've worked with X council for 20 years, and that's not how it works now. You will only be scored on what you put in the paper, and everyone outside will tell you that who's involved in procurement. Very, very frustrating for them to see a really good local supplier and they've just put in really a very weak form, not because they've not tried, but they've made that assumption that they're already well known. Scanty project profiles. I did a review of a national sort of household name company about a month ago, and they were describing some of their projects, and it was like 2 or 3 sentences for each one. So beautifully produced, desktop publishing quality, nice photograph of the project, very nicely laid out, but absolutely no substance at all for the projects that were there. So of the marks available, they would have got some marks obviously, and the projects were all in the right sort of area, but really not enough detail if they went head to head with another company with the same sort of profile as well. We provide a checklist actually as part of a lot of these activities for these different methodologies, what to put in your project profiles. So I'll do my plug now. Stand 20, just as you go downstairs, but we can take some details from you if you want and send some of those through. Describe your business activities. I mentioned at the start, and we call this kind of your elevator pitch because it's the first part of a PQQ that the buyer will read, and it's your first chance to absolutely sell yourself. And I don't mean by that lots of brochure type text. I mean just a very factual but quite comprehensive description of the purpose of your organisation. You'll be surprised how many people describe their business activities and you're a third of the way through and you still actually don't know what they do. Not a mission statement. A little bit maybe when you were established, if that's a nice story to tell, and you've grown over the period. What services do you provide? And I would always do this as bullet points. So if you're bidding to do landscape gardening, but you do landscape gardening and half a dozen other things, obviously have the landscape gardening at the top, but also mention the other things your company does, because that could have a nice sort of backup capability that's of interest to them. And then your capacity, and this is where folks say, oh, we've got vast experience. It's my absolute pet hate. We're unique, we've got a unique, I don't ever use the word unique unless you really are, but do say how many clients you've got, what scale of project you can do. Maybe if you're in waste management, we can handle X tons to whatever tons. Our jobs are typically in what sort of areas. What public sector contracts you have already. So, I mean, I know it's difficult if you're in for the first time, you may not have any. If you don't have public sector references, who is it in the commercial sector that you're working with? What different sectors are you in? Anything at all. It's a bit like a person's CV. You know, think of the depth you would need to know about them, not just, I've been to college, I've done this, that and the other. But try and get some sort of scoping, if you like, to your capability. Any strategic reasons why you are competitive in the market? It might be that you're maybe the first one to use a particular type of technique. You might have introduced some sort of novelty into the market. You might be, I don't know, have a unique range of services. That's quite a nice one. You say, well, we've got lots of competitors who do X, but we're actually the only company that can do X through to Y to Z, end to end. You might have a very specialist focus as well, which the client will want to know. And then operationally, a lot of people forget things about your infrastructure. I spoke to somebody again yesterday, and it turns out they have the most amazing tracking system for all their jobs, which all the KPIs link to, and they get all these automatic reports, and they're a very, very small company. You think, well, that, if I was a buyer, I would want to know about that up front and say this is part of our, what supports our business activities as well. Project references, say this is our sort of checklist, so don't just say the basics. Talk about sustainability aspects of your projects, any innovations, any challenges that were overcome, for example. Innovation doesn't have to be blue skies, it might be something about how you store information. I've seen quite a lot of nice people who keep information in quite a secure way, or let their clients log into their websites. Sustainability, again, this could be a sort of lecture in itself almost, but all of those aspects of your service you need to be mentioning in relation to projects as well. And community benefit, which I don't know if there's a seminar on about community benefit today, but increasingly, you know, what are you doing in terms of recruiting long-term unemployed? Was there anything in the project where you maybe did a sort of visit to a local school or something? We had a client yesterday who were in a sort of security type area in terms of sort of alarms and things. And they go, why don't you go into the local community centres and do a lecture on that for the local community? So you get quite tangible, nice ideas of what you can do in a project. So I think I might be half a minute over, but this is, I think in summary, it's all about planning. So big open questions, plan your response, use diagrams, evidence, as much evidence as you can is going to be the difference between what I would call a reasonable scored question and something that achieves an excellent score. And then obviously the feedback, because if you don't get feedback on your submissions, you're actually still working in the dark. But if you start to identify ones where you've had a good response, get that into your tender library. Don't use it cut and paste all the time, but use that as the basis to develop it. It's not easy, but we've had quite a lot of clients who've started off with weak answers, I would say, in one or two areas, and by addressing maybe just 5 or 6 questions in their PQQ and their tenders, they've actually seen their marks come up and they've started to win contracts. So it's eminently doable. We're on the stand downstairs. I've got some flyers here, but thanks very much for turning up in such numbers. Thank you.